Hi, I'm Annie Fitzsimmons. I'm your Washington REALTORS legal hotline lawyer. This video series is going to cover the most significant revisions to the statewide form system that were released on March 3rd, 2021. And we're going to start with Form 35, the inspection contingency. There's two significant changes to that form that I want to address. The first has to do with who can inspect seller's property and when. Here's the big change. Now, regardless of whether you are in the initial inspection period or the additional inspection period, buyer is entitled to bring specialists onto seller's property to inspect. If buyer is conducting their general home inspection, then buyer must have a licensed home inspector perform the inspection. Buyer can always do their own inspection, not buyer's Uncle Joe or buyer's dad or anybody like that, but buyer personally can always do their own inspection. But let's set buyer personally aside for a moment because that's not who we're talking about. I want to talk about who, other than buyer can bring onto seller's property. So during either the initial or the additional inspection period, buyer can bring a licensed home inspector to do the general home inspection. And beyond that, buyer can bring anybody who might fall under the category heading of specialist. That would include a licensed electrician to inspect the electrical system, a licensed plumber to inspect the plumbing system. It could also include a roofing contractor to inspect the roof or to give a bid to replace or repair the roof. It might include a mold abatement contractor to give a bid or advise as to the extent of any mold damage that might exist. There is no longer a distinction between the initial inspection period and the additional inspection period as to who buyer can bring onto seller's property during those two inspection periods. The only distinction now between those two inspection periods is the time. So buyer is automatically entitled to the initial inspection period. If buyer also needs the extra time in the additional inspection period, buyer would have to trigger the additional inspection time period by delivering a Form 35R, marking the appropriate box, and accompanying with that Form 35R the recommendations from buyer's licensed home inspector, or if buyer has done their own inspection, they're going to have to write their own recommendations. But provide a list of the recommendations from the inspector regarding additional inspections that the inspector recommends. The inspector's additional inspections are the only portion of the buyer's inspection report that should be delivered to seller. And in fact, brokers, if your inspectors, your favorite inspectors, are not already preparing their reports with a separate page that identifies the additional inspections that are recommended, you should ask them to do that. Many inspectors are already doing that. The inspection report, and then it contains a separate page that has just the additional inspections that are recommended. That is important because of the next thing we're going to talk about. The next change to the statewide Form 35 inspection contingency provides a consequence to the prohibition on buyer delivering a copy of buyer's inspection report or any portion of buyer's inspection report except the additional inspection recommendations necessary to trigger the additional inspection time period. Other than that exception, if buyer delivers any or all of buyer's inspection report to seller or listing broker without seller's consent, then buyer waives the home inspection contingency. If buyer delivers any or all of buyer's inspection report to seller without seller's consent, buyer waives the home inspection contingency. How does seller consent? There's two ways seller can consent. There is, on the face of Form 35, paragraph 4B, provides two check mark boxes where a seller could mark one of those boxes to consent at the time of mutual acceptance to buyer's delivery of some or all of the inspection report. If seller wants, I lost my train of thought there for a second, but here's where I was going with that. If seller marks one of those boxes, and that's the only change seller makes to buyer's offer, otherwise seller accepts buyer's offer, then marking one of those boxes is not a counteroffer. Seller has, in fact, accepted buyer's offer, even though seller might have marked one of those boxes for delivery of buyer's inspection report. If seller doesn't consent to delivery of the inspection report on the face of Form 35 at the time of mutual acceptance, seller could do that later by marking one of the boxes on a new form, Form 35C. The one piece of advice I would give to listing brokers is to scrutinize Form 35. Don't assume that Form 35 is just a bunch of boilerplate. Before seller accepts buyer's offer, seller is going to have to make sure that if seller does not want to consent to delivery of buyer's inspection report to seller, that buyer has not marked one of those boxes under paragraph 4B on seller's behalf. Because if buyer's offer includes one of those boxes being marked and seller accepts buyer's offer, initials the Form 35 without making change, then seller has consented to receipt of some or all of buyer's inspection report. Those are the most significant changes to Form 35. If you have questions on those changes or anything else, send an email to me, legalhotline@warealtor.org. Thank you for being a Washington REALTORS member.